The room was full of people. 32 guests, crystal glasses, a 20-foot mahogany table, and not one person said a word. Because Ethan Morgan had just dropped a white envelope onto his pregnant wife's dinner plate, right on top of the cranberry sauce, and said 5 words that would destroy everything.
And
Sign them before dessert. His wife, Grace, sat in a wheelchair, 3 months pregnant, and the woman sitting in her chair, wearing her anniversary bracelet, was his mistress. But here is what nobody at that table knew. Not Ethan, not his cruel mother, not the mistress who was already spending money that was not hers. The woman they just called worthless? She owned everything. Every chair they sat in, every glass they drank from, every dollar in the company that kept them all rich. She just did not know it yet, and by the time she found out, her father's grave had already whispered the secret. Someone she trusted had already sold her out, and the one witness who could save her was already dead. This is the story of how a husband divorced his disabled pregnant wife at a family dinner, and she canceled their $950 million deal. But it is also a story about something bigger. It is about the moment a woman stops believing the lie that she is not enough. Because strength was never about standing up. It was about refusing to stay down. Lesson and value. Every quiet woman who has ever been told she is too broken to matter needs to hear this. Your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not surrender. And the people who underestimate you have already made their biggest mistake. This story will remind you that truth does not expire, that the ones who love us protect us even after they are gone, and that the most powerful thing a woman can do is decide that she deserves better. Hello, family. Welcome back. And if this is your first time here, you are in the right place. Before we begin, I have one small request. If you believe that stories like this need to be told, hit that subscribe button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps us keep sharing stories that give courage to the women and children who have been broken, forgotten, or silenced. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment, and tell us where you are watching from tonight. And if someone in your life needs to hear this, share it with them, because sometimes one story at the right moment can change everything. Now let us begin.
The fork hit the porcelain plate with a sound like a small bone breaking. The dining room of the Morgan estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, held 32 guests that Thanksgiving evening. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light and threw tiny rainbows across the walls. The smell of roasted turkey and rosemary filled the air. Silver platters lined the 20-foot mahogany table, and every seat was taken by someone wearing something expensive. Every seat except one. Grace Whitfield Morgan sat at the far end of the table in her wheelchair. 3 months pregnant. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back simply, and she wore a navy dress that she had picked not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only one that still fit over her growing belly and sat right in the chair. Her hands rested on her lap, steady, though her heart was anything but. She had noticed it the moment she wheeled into the dining room. Her usual seat beside Ethan, the one with the armrest removed so her wheelchair could slide in close, was occupied. Harper Sinclair sat there now, her auburn hair falling in perfect waves over a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. On her wrist, catching the light every time she reached for her wine glass, was a diamond bracelet. Grace recognized it immediately. She had opened that bracelet on their 5th anniversary. Ethan had clasped it on her wrist and kissed her forehead and said, 5 years down, forever to go. That was 2 years ago, before the accident, before the wheelchair, before everything that mattered crumbled like dry bread. Grace said nothing about the bracelet. She said nothing about the seating. She smiled at the guests who awkwardly avoided her eyes and accepted the plate that was set in front of her by a server who looked at her with something close to pity. Victoria Morgan, Ethan's mother, sat at the head of the table like a queen holding a court. 63 years old, Silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, pearls resting against her collarbone, like they had been born there. She raised her glass. "To family," Victoria said, her voice warm in the way that expensive things are warm, polished, controlled, to new chapters, and to the future of the Morgan name. Glasses clinked around the table. Grace raised hers, water, not wine, because of the baby, and no one clinked back. Ethan Morgan sat at the center of the table, 38 years old, handsome in the way that power makes men handsome, sharp jaw, confident posture, a suit that fit like it was stitched onto his body. He was the CEO of Helios Corporation, which was what he had renamed Whitfield Enterprises after Grace's father died. He had not looked at Grace once since she arrived. The dinner conversation flowed around her like a river around a stone. Business talk. Vacation plans. A new yacht someone had purchased. Harper laughed at something Ethan said, her hand touching his arm with practiced ease, and the guests pretended not to notice. Grace ate slowly. She focused on the turkey. She focused on breathing. Then Ethan stood up. The table went quiet. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had pressed a mute button on the room. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He held it for a moment, looking at it, then walked the length of the table toward Grace. His shoes clicked on the hardwood floor. Each step echoed. He stopped beside her wheelchair and placed the envelope on her plate, right on top of the untouched cranberry sauce. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said. His voice was calm, rehearsed. "Those are divorce papers. I'd appreciate it if you signed them before dessert." The silence that followed was so complete that Grace could hear the candles flickering. She looked at the envelope. She looked at his hand, the hand that had once held hers through 27 days in the hospital. The hand that had carried her from a burning car when she was 29 years old, before the surgeries, before the wheelchair, before he decided she was no longer worth carrying. Harper leaned toward Victoria and whispered, loud enough for the nearest 10 guests to hear, at least now she can focus on physical therapy. Victoria smiled. Not a large smile, just a small lift at the corner of her mouth, the kind of smile that said everything without saying a word. Grace picked up the envelope. Her fingers trembled, but only slightly. She looked at Ethan. For one long moment, she searched his face for the man who had slept on hospital floors, who had learned physical therapy exercises so he could help her at home, who had once told her she was the strongest person he had ever met. That man was gone, or buried so deep that it no longer mattered. She placed the envelope back on the plate. She did not open it. "No," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me? I said no. Not here. Not like this." His jaw tightened. "Grace, don't make this harder than it needs to be." She looked past him to the 30 faces watching her. Not one of them had spoken. Not one had said, "This is wrong." Not one had pushed back their chair or set down their fork or done anything at all except watch. Like this was entertainment. She placed her hands on the wheels of her chair. "You are all very comfortable," she said, her voice steady but low. "Sitting in a house that my father built, eating food paid for by a company my father created, and not one of you has the courage to say that what just happened is wrong." She turned her wheelchair toward the door, the heavy oak door that she already knew would be difficult to open. She reached it and pulled. It barely moved. She pulled again. Her arms shook. The chair slipped backward on the polished floor. No one got up to help. On the third pull, the door opened enough for her to squeeze through. The November air hit her face like a slap. Cold, sharp, honest in a way that nothing inside that room had been. She wheeled herself down the ramp that Ethan had installed 2 years ago when he still cared, and stopped in the driveway. The gravel was uneven under her wheels. The sky was dark and starless. She pulled out her phone and called Lily. No answer. She sat there for 5 minutes. 10, 20. The cold crept through her dress and into her bones. Her baby moved inside her, a tiny flutter, and she pressed her hand against her belly. She scrolled through her contacts, found a number she had not deleted, her mother's old cell phone, disconnected for 5 years. She pressed call. The automated message played. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She held the phone to her ear anyway. Mom, she whispered into the dead line, I do not know what to do. 40 minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway. Lily Brennan's old Subaru crunched over the gravel and stopped. Lily jumped out, her coat buttoned wrong, her hair still wet from the shower she had clearly been in when she finally saw the missed calls. She did not ask what happened. She saw Grace's face and understood. She knelt beside the wheelchair, wrapped her arms around her best friend, and held her while the warmth from the house, where no one had helped, spilled uselessly into the night. The apartment above Rosemary's Bakery on Elm Street in Bridgeport was small, 1 bedroom, a kitchen with a window that stuck, a bathroom where the hot water took 4 minutes to arrive, and a living room barely large enough for Grace's wheelchair to turn around in. It smelled like cinnamon. That was because of Mrs. Callahan, the 70-year-old owner of the bakery downstairs, who appeared at Grace's door every morning at 7:30 with a paper bag of fresh cinnamon rolls and advice that nobody had asked for. Honey, Mrs. Callahan said, on Grace's 3rd morning there, placing the bag on the kitchen counter and looking around the sparse apartment with the expression of someone inspecting a crime scene. You know what the best revenge is? Grace, who had barely slept, looked up from her coffee. I really do not want to hear that it is living well. An excellent credit score, Mrs. Callahan said firmly. A man can take your house, your car, your dignity, but he cannot take an 800 credit score. That is yours. She patted Grace's hand, left the cinnamon rolls, and disappeared downstairs. The bell on the bakery door jingled behind her. Grace almost smiled. Almost. The first week was the hardest. Not because of the apartment, which was fine. Not because of the money, which was tight but manageable. The hardest part was the silence. After 7 years of living in the Morgan estate, with its echoing hallways and constant noise of staff and visitors, and Ethan's voice on the phone, the quiet of that 1-bedroom apartment felt like being buried alive. She did not watch the news. Lily had warned her not to. But on the 4th night, she made the mistake of checking her phone, and there it was. The headline on every gossip site and tabloid feed in the state. Billionaire CEO Ethan Morgan files for divorce from disabled wife at family dinner. The comments were worse than the headline. Some called Ethan heartless. But others, far too many others, said things like, she probably trapped him with the pregnancy. And, can you blame him? He is building an empire. He needs a partner, not a patient. She put the phone face down on the table and did not pick it up again for 2 days. Lily came every evening after her kindergarten class let out. She brought groceries, gossip from her school, which involved a 5-year-old named Marcus who had somehow gotten a crayon stuck in his ear, and a relentless optimism that Grace found both annoying and essential. You need to eat more, Lily said on the 6th evening, unpacking a bag from the grocery store. You are growing a human being. That requires calories. I ate 2 cinnamon rolls today. That is sugar, not food. Mrs. Callahan would disagree. Lily paused, holding a bunch of bananas like a weapon. Grace, what are you going to do? Grace looked at the boxes stacked against the living room wall, 12 cardboard boxes that Ethan had allowed her to take from the estate. Her clothes, some books, and 4 boxes from her father's study that Ethan had dismissed as old junk. "I do not know yet," Grace said, "but I think my father might." That night, after Lily left, Grace opened the first box from her father's study. William Whitfield had been a meticulous man, an engineer by training, a businessman by necessity, and a father by devotion. He had founded Whitfield Enterprises at age 31 in a garage in Hartford, built it into a technology company worth hundreds of millions, and died of what the doctors called a sudden cardiac event when Grace was 31 years old, the same age he had been when he started the company. She had always found that coincidence painful. The box contained old files, tax returns, engineering sketches, a photograph of her father standing in front of the original Whitfield Enterprises sign, grinning like a man who had just gotten away with something wonderful. The second box held more of the same. The third was mostly books. The fourth box, the one at the bottom of the stack, the one she had to stretch from her wheelchair to reach, contained a single sealed envelope, heavy cream-colored paper, her father's handwriting on the front, and the careful block letters he always used. "For Grace. Open when you are ready to fight." Her breath stopped. She turned the envelope over. The seal was unbroken. The paper was slightly yellowed with age. He had written this years ago. She held it for a long time. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on Elm Street. Her baby shifted inside her, a slow roll that pressed against her ribs. She opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a letter, handwritten on 4 pages of her father's personal stationery, a small brass key on a thin chain, and a flash drive wrapped in tissue paper. She unfolded the letter. "My dearest Grace, if you are reading this, then something has gone wrong. Not with the company, with the people I trusted to protect it and to protect you. I am writing this on a Tuesday afternoon in October, and I am sitting in my study looking at the photograph of you at your law school graduation, and I am so proud of you that my chest hurts." Grace's vision blurred. She blinked hard and continued reading. "I have created something called the Whitfield Legacy Trust. It is a legal instrument filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission that establishes you as the controlling shareholder of Whitfield Enterprises, holding 60% equity. This trust is activated by the key enclosed with this letter and a code that only you would know. It is the date of the last fish you ever caught at the cabin in Vermont. You remember. You were 12. You cried because you felt sorry for the base." Grace laughed. A single broken laugh that turned into something else halfway through. July 19th, she was 12. She had sobbed over a smallmouth bass until her father gently unhooked it and let it go. "I have also included a flash drive containing documents that I hope you will never need. But if you do need them, Grace, then someone has taken what is yours, and I need you to take it back, not with anger. Your mother had enough anger for both of us, God rest her. Take it back with patience and with truth. I love you more than every star in the Vermont sky. Dad." She read the letter 3 times, then she picked up her phone and called a number she had not dialed in 3 years. It rang twice. "David Calloway," said a gravelly voice, the voice of her father's oldest friend, his attorney, his fishing partner, and the only man at William Whitfield's funeral who had looked at Ethan Morgan and did not smile. "David," Grace said. "It is Grace." A long pause. Then, quietly, with the warmth of a man who had been waiting. "Took you long enough, kid. I have been keeping that bourbon warm for 3 years." David Calloway's office was located above a hardware store on Main Street in Westport. The building was old, the stairs were narrow, and there was no elevator. David carried Grace up the 17 steps himself, then went back for the wheelchair, then came back breathing hard and pretending he was fine. "I could have met you somewhere accessible," Grace said. "Nonsense. I have been meaning to work on my cardio." The office was exactly what Grace expected. Leather chairs cracked with age, bookshelves overflowing with legal volumes and fishing magazines, a taxidermied largemouth bass mounted on the wall behind the desk with a small brass plaque that read, "Judge Trout, honorable and delicious." David poured 2 bourbons, slid one to Grace. She looked at it. "I am pregnant, David." He paused. "Right. Apple juice?" "Water is fine." He sat down across from her, took a long sip, and set the glass on a coaster shaped like a trout. Then he leaned forward, his expression shifting from the warm uncle to the attorney who had once made a federal prosecutor cry on cross-examination. "Your father was the smartest man I ever knew," David said. "He trusted people. That was his gift and his weakness. But he also built trapdoors." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. The tab read, "Phoenix Clause." "Your father filed this with the SEC 18 months before he died. It is an investment protection clause embedded in the corporate charter of Whitfield Enterprises, now called Helios Corporation. In simple terms, it says this: if the company is ever found to have been obtained through fraud, forgery, or mismanagement, ownership automatically reverts to the designated beneficiary of the Whitfield Legacy Trust." "Which is me," Grace said. "Which is you. But here is the catch. The clause is only activated when hard evidence of fraud is presented to the SEC and accepted. Not allegations, not suspicions, evidence, documents, recordings, financial trails, the kind of proof that makes lawyers weep with joy." Grace looked at the folder. "Ethan forged my father's signature on the ownership transfer documents. He did it while I was in the hospital after my accident, when I was on so much medication I could barely remember my own name." David nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. But suspecting and proving are 2 very different sports. We need a forensic accountant, someone who can trace the money, find the forgeries, and build a case that not even Ethan's army of lawyers can tear apart." "Do you know someone?" David leaned back. "I know a kid. He is strange, brilliant, but strange." Noah Prescott arrived 40 minutes later, 31 years old, wrinkled button-down shirt, rectangular glasses slightly crooked on his nose. He was eating cereal from a plastic container with a spoon, and he had brought his golden retriever, a big, dopey animal who immediately lay down on David's rug and fell asleep. "This is Spreadsheet," Noah said, gesturing at the dog. "He comes everywhere." David looked at the dog, then at Noah, then at Grace. "I said he was strange." Noah set down his cereal and opened his laptop. His demeanor changed instantly. The awkward cereal-eating dog owner vanished, replaced by someone whose eyes moved across numbers the way a pianist's fingers move across keys. "I worked at Helios for 2 years, Noah said, in the finance division. I quit 13 months ago because I found anomalies in the corporate accounts that my supervisors told me to ignore. $47 million routed through 6 shell companies over 18 months. All the transfers were authorized by electronic signature." "Whose signature?" Grace asked. Noah turned the laptop toward her. On the screen was a digital authorization form. At the bottom, in clean electronic text, was a name: Harper Sinclair, Chief Financial Officer. "His mistress," Grace said quietly. "She is more than that," Noah said. "She is the one moving the money. Ethan is the face, But Harper is the engine. Every offshore account, every dummy corporation, every laundered dollar goes through her. David whistled low. So the mistress is also the embezzler. That is efficient. Grace stared at the screen. Can you prove all of this? Not just the transfers, but the forgeries, the original ownership documents, the stolen signatures. Noah closed his laptop and looked at her directly. I can trace every dollar that has moved through Helios in the last 5 years. Every forged document leaves a digital fingerprint. But I need access to the original files, and those are locked in the Helios corporate archives. One step at a time, David said. First, we file the trust documents with the SEC and establish Grace's legal claim. For one afternoon, everything felt possible. Grace, Lily, David, and Noah sat in that cramped office above the hardware store, eating Chinese takeout from paper containers and talking strategy. David opened the good bourbon. Lily accidentally knocked over her lo mein and spreadsheet, ate it off the floor before anyone could stop him. Noah explained the shell company structure using a napkin and a pen, comparing it to a chain of McDonald's restaurants that did not actually sell hamburgers, but instead shipped the money to the Cayman Islands. David stared at him. I suddenly understand hedge funds. Grace laughed. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. Then Lily's phone rang. Or rather, it did not ring. It dialed. She had sat on it, and the screen showed an active call to a contact labeled, "Do not answer. This is Ethan." Everyone froze. Lily grabbed the phone. The call had been active for 11 seconds. She could hear Ethan's voice, faint and confused, saying, "Hello? Who is this?" Lily panicked. She looked at Grace, looked at David, looked at Noah, and then she put the phone to her ear and said, in the worst fake voice any of them had ever heard, "Good evening, sir. Are you interested in our premium goat yoga membership package? First month free with a referral." Silence on the other end. Then Ethan said, "What?" and hung up. The room was quiet for 3 seconds. Then David said, very slowly, "Goat yoga." Lily's face was crimson. It was the first thing that came to my mind. Noah looked genuinely interested. Is goat yoga real? Because Spreadsheet would love that. Grace pressed her hand against her belly, her shoulders shaking. "If we survive this," she said through tears of laughter, "I am buying you an actual goat." It was a good moment, a warm moment, the kind of moment that makes you believe things will work out. Those moments never last. The headline appeared at 6:42 in the morning. Pregnant ex-wife's billion-dollar shakedown. Is Grace Morgan running a con? Grace saw it on her phone before her feet, or rather her wheels, had even made it to the kitchen. The article was on every major tabloid site, every gossip feed, every social media platform that thrived on other people's pain. It quoted anonymous sources close to the Morgan family and painted a picture of Grace as a manipulative, gold-digging woman who had faked her disability severity and deliberately gotten pregnant to trap a billionaire husband into a massive settlement. The article included photographs. Grace at the Thanksgiving dinner, taken from someone's phone, her face mid-expression, mouth slightly open, looking confused, which the caption described as calculating. A photo of her apartment building described as modest lodgings chosen for sympathy optics. And worst of all, a photograph of her in the wheelchair outside the Morgan estate, taken from behind, making her look small and hunched and pitiful. That last photo had been taken the night of the dinner. Someone at that table had photographed her in her worst moment and sold it. Lily called at 7:15. Do not read the comments. I already read the comments. Grace, someone said I should be grateful any man married me at all. Someone else said the baby probably is not even his, and 14 people suggested I was faking the wheelchair. I am coming over. Lily, you have school. The kindergartners can wait. Marcus will just stick another crayon somewhere. I am coming. But before Lily arrived, Grace's phone rang again. This time it was her obstetrician's office. The receptionist's voice was strained, apologetic. Mrs. Morgan, Dr. Reeves wanted me to let you know that she has received several press inquiries regarding your pregnancy. She has declined to comment, of course, but she felt you should know. They were calling her doctor. They were trying to get her medical provider to confirm or deny her pregnancy on the record. Grace hung up and sat very still in her kitchen. The cinnamon roll Mrs. Callahan had left that morning sat untouched on the counter. Outside, a car drove slowly past the bakery, and she saw the glint of a camera's lens through the passenger window. They were here. Over the next 72 hours, the campaign escalated. A second article appeared, this one in a more reputable outlet, quoting legal experts, who suggested Grace's claim to the Whitfield Trust was potentially fraudulent. A television segment ran on an evening entertainment show featuring a panel of commentators debating whether Grace was brave or delusional. Harper Sinclair was behind all of it. Grace was certain, but certainty was not proof. Then came the betrayal that broke her. Grace had hired a paralegal named Jessica Torres 3 weeks earlier, through David's recommendation. Jessica was 26, eager, smart, and had been helping organize the trust documents for the SEC filing. Grace had trusted her, had confided in her, had shown her the flash drive, the letter, the Phoenix clause, everything. On a Thursday evening, David called. His voice was different, flat, careful. Grace, I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm. What happened? Jessica sold copies of your trust documents to Victoria Morgan. We do not know exactly when, but Victoria's lawyers filed an emergency motion this morning claiming the documents are potentially forged. The judge has frozen the SEC filing pending review. The phone felt heavy in Grace's hand. How much did they pay her? Grace asked. $50,000. $50,000. That was the price of Grace's trust. That was the price of her father's legacy. A woman she had mentored and confided in had sold her out for the cost of a mid-range car. She did not scream. She did not throw anything. She simply ended the call, wheeled herself to the window, and pulled the curtains shut. When Lily arrived an hour later, the apartment was dark. Grace sat in the center of the living room, not crying. Worse than crying, hollow, like someone had reached inside her and scooped out everything that kept her upright. Grace, Lily said softly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. I had everything in my hands, Grace said. Everything my father left me, everything I needed, and they took it in one day. So we start again. I cannot. Her voice cracked. Look at me, Lily. I cannot walk. I cannot fight billion-dollar lawyers. I am sitting in a one-bedroom apartment eating cinnamon rolls from a 70-year-old woman who thinks revenge is an excellent credit score. And maybe she is right. Maybe that is the only kind of fight I am built for. Lily sat on the floor beside her. She did not argue. She did not give a pep talk. She just sat there, in the dark, in the quiet, and let Grace be broken for a while. After a long time, Lily said, My therapist once told me something. You do not have to see the whole staircase. You just have to take the next step. Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. If you quote your therapist one more time, she is very expensive. Someone should get their money's worth. Grace almost laughed. Almost. And almost was enough. Because sometimes the next step is not forward. Sometimes it is just deciding not to quit. And that night, in that dark apartment, with her best friend sitting on the floor beside her and her baby turning slowly inside her, Grace made one small decision. She would not disappear. Noah called at 2 in the morning. Grace had learned that Noah operated on a schedule that bore no resemblance to normal human behavior. He slept from 6 to 10 in the morning, ate breakfast at noon, and did his best work between midnight and 4 a.m. while Spreadsheet snored at his feet and a playlist of ocean sounds played from a speaker shaped like a whale. "I found something," he said. "You need to see this." Grace wheeled herself to the kitchen table where her laptop sat. She opened the video call. Noah's face appeared, lit blue by his screens, his glasses reflecting lines of code and financial data. Behind him, Spreadsheet was asleep on a beanbag chair. "I have been going through the flash drive your father left," Noah said. "The main files are the trust documents and the financial records we already know about. But there was a hidden partition, encrypted. It took me 3 nights to crack it. What was inside?" Noah's expression changed. The usual, slightly detached, cereal-eating demeanor was gone. He looked shaken. "A toxicology report. Ordered by your father 6 weeks before he died. He sent his own blood samples to an independent laboratory under a fake name. The results show elevated levels of a compound called thallium sulfate. It is a slow-acting poison. Odorless, tasteless. Administered over weeks, it mimics the symptoms of heart disease." The kitchen was very quiet. "Grace," Noah said carefully, "your father did not die of a heart attack. He was poisoned, and he knew it." She did not speak for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street below. Her baby moved, a small kick against her ribs, and she pressed her hand flat against her belly. "There is more," Noah said. "Attached to the toxicology report is a second letter. I am sending it to you now." Her laptop chimed. She opened the file. Her father's handwriting filled the screen, smaller this time, more urgent. "Grace, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I could not stop it. I do not know who is doing this to me, but I know it is someone close. The symptoms started 8 weeks ago. Fatigue, confusion, pain in my hands and feet. Dr. Harrison said it was stress. I do not believe him. I sent my blood to a private lab. The results confirmed what I feared. Someone in my own house is killing me slowly, and they think I do not know. I have hidden everything you will need. I could not save myself, sweetheart. So I saved everything you will need to save yourself. Be patient, be smart, and when you strike, do not miss. I love you, Dad." Grace read the letter once. Then she closed the laptop, wheeled herself to the bathroom, and was sick. She sat on the cold tile floor, afterward, her back against the bathtub, her hand on her belly, and she cried. Not the controlled, dignified tears she had shed at the dinner, not the hollow emptiness of the smear campaign. This was grief, raw, deep, and savage. The kind that comes when you learn that the worst thing that ever happened to you was even worse than you knew. Her father had died alone, knowing he was being murdered, and his last act had been to protect her. She cried until her ribs ached, until her throat was raw, until there was nothing left. Then she washed her face, wheeled herself back to the kitchen, and called David Calloway. "David, my father was poisoned." The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Then David's voice, low and steady, "Tell me everything." By morning, the team had a new mission. This was no longer about a company. This was about murder. Noah traced the timeline. The poisoning had begun approximately 10 weeks before William Whitfield's death. During that same period, William had been seeing a new doctor, a man named Martin Hale, who had been recommended by a family friend. Dr. Hale had prescribed William a daily vitamin supplement, a special compound that he mixed himself at his private office. "Who recommended Dr. Hale?" Grace asked. Noah pulled up an email from the Helios corporate server, recovered from a backup that Ethan's team had failed to fully delete. The email was from Victoria Morgan to William Whitfield, dated 14 months before his death. "William dear, I have found the most wonderful physician, Dr. Martin Hale. He specializes in executive wellness. I have taken the liberty of scheduling an appointment for you. You work too hard, and we all worry." Grace read the email 3 times. "She recommended the doctor," Grace said. "My mother-in-law recommended the man who poisoned my father." David's face was grim. "We do not have enough yet to prove she ordered it. We need a direct connection between Victoria and Hale. A payment, a communication, something." "What about Elias Hart?" Lily asked. Everyone turned to her. "He was your father's head of security for 15 years. He disappeared right after the funeral. If anyone saw something, it would be him." Grace remembered Elias, a tall, quiet man with kind eyes who used to sneak her peppermints during board meetings when she was a child. He had stood at the back of her father's funeral, alone, and had left before anyone could speak to him. "Can you find him?" Grace asked Noah. Noah cracked his knuckles. "I found 47 million in hidden assets. I can find one retired security guard." It took Noah 4 days. Elias Hart was living in a small rental house in New London, working as a night security guard at a storage facility. He had changed his phone number 3 times in 3 years. Grace called him from a burner phone that Noah had insisted she use. "Elias, it is Grace Whitfield." The silence lasted so long she thought he had hung up. Then, very quietly, "I have been waiting for this call for 3 years." They agreed to meet, but not yet, because there were other pieces to gather first, and the most dangerous piece was still locked inside the Helios corporate archives. The Helios Technologies annual fundraiser was held at the Langham Hotel in downtown Hartford. Black tie. 500 guests, an open bar that cost more than most people earned in a year. And somewhere inside, in Ethan Morgan's private office on the 17th floor, were the original documents that would prove everything. The plan was simple. Lily and Noah would attend the fundraiser, posing as guests. While the party occupied the main ballroom, Noah would slip away and plant a small recording device in Ethan's office. The device, about the size of a thumbnail, would transmit to a receiver in Noah's car for 72 hours before its battery died. Getting in was the first problem. "I am on the guest list," Lily said confidently. Then she paused. "Well, not the real guest list. Noah made a fake one." "I adjusted the digital guest registry," Noah corrected. "Technically, you are now Contessa Valentina Brennan Worthington of the Brennan Worthington Foundation." Grace stared at him. "You gave her a fake royal title?" It seemed convincing. Lily tried on 3 dresses before settling on a green one that she said made her look mysterious and European. She put on a red wig that she bought from a costume shop and practiced an accent that sounded like someone from no specific country on earth. "How do I sound?" she asked. "Like someone having a mild allergic reaction," David said from his chair. The night of the fundraiser, Grace stayed in David's office, monitoring communications through a laptop Noah had set up. David sat beside her, bourbon in hand, watching the live audio feed like it was a radio drama. Lily and Noah arrived at the Langham at 7:45. The lobby was all marble and gold. A string quartet played something elegant. Waiters in white gloves carried trays of champagne. A woman at the registration desk smiled at Lily. "Good evening. Name, please?" Lily drew herself up to her full 5 feet 4 inches. "Contessa Valentina Brennan Worthington," she said in an accent that had somehow migrated from Italian to Scottish mid-sentence. "Of the Brennan Worthington Foundation." The woman checked the list, smiled. Of course. Welcome, Contessa. In David's office, Grace covered her mouth. David shook his head slowly. Noah followed behind Lily. He wore a dark suit that did not quite fit, and an expression that suggested he would rather be anywhere else on Earth. When the registration woman asked his name, he froze. I am... He glanced at Lily, then at the list, then back at the woman. Noah, spreadsheet. Lily closed her eyes. Noah spreadsheet, the woman repeated. That is... a family name, Scandinavian. The woman looked doubtful, but let him through. In David's office, David poured himself another bourbon. This is the worst covert operation in the history of espionage. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. While Lily distracted a group of investors with a rambling story about her fictional foundation's work with endangered alpine butterflies, Noah slipped into the service elevator, rode to the 17th floor, and planted the device behind a picture frame in Ethan's office. He was back in the ballroom in 11 minutes. The recordings over the next 3 days captured everything. Ethan and Harper discussing the offshore accounts in explicit detail, Harper reviewing the forged ownership documents, and laughing about how easy it had been, and one conversation that changed everything. Harper speaking to Ethan late at night, her voice low and confident. You know, once this merger closes, you do not actually need the CEO title anymore. I have been thinking about a restructuring. Ethan. What kind of restructuring? Harper. The kind where I run things, officially. Ethan. You are joking. Harper. I never joke about power, Ethan. You brought me in for my brain, remember? Not just my other qualities. A long silence. Then Ethan, we will discuss this later. Harper. We will, and you will agree, because I have copies of everything you have ever signed, including the things that were not exactly legal. Grace listened to that recording 3 times. She is not just his mistress, she said. She is positioning herself to take over. She does not love him. She never did. David nodded. That makes her more dangerous than Ethan. A man driven by ego is predictable. A woman driven by ambition is a chess player. Then we need to be playing a different game entirely, Grace said. They had the recordings. They had the financial trails. They had the toxicology report. Now they needed the last piece. Elias Hart's testimony in the original ledger, the physical book her father had kept in the Helios archives, documenting every transaction, every meeting, every decision. The book that Ethan thought he had buried. Grace picked up the burner phone. Elias? It is time. They met in a park in New London on a bench overlooking the Thames River. Not the famous one, the Connecticut one, which was smaller and less romantic, but served the purpose of being public enough to feel safe and quiet, enough to speak freely. Elias Hart looked like a man who had been carrying a secret for so long that it had worn grooves into his face. His hair was gray now. His hands were steady, but his eyes were not. I was with your father the night he died, Elias said. He did not look at Grace. He looked at the water. I had been his head of security for 15 years. I drove him home every night. I knew his schedule better than my own. What happened? He called me that afternoon, said he needed to talk, said he had discovered something about the company, about Ethan, and about his own health. He sounded scared, Grace. Your father was never scared. The wind came off the water and pulled at Grace's hair. She pulled her coat tighter around her belly. We met at his office at 8 p.m. He showed me the toxicology report. He said someone was poisoning him, and he believed it was connected to the financial irregularities he had found. He was going to confront Ethan the next morning. But he never made it to the next morning, Grace said. Elias shook his head. He collapsed at home that night. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The hospital ruled it cardiac arrest. But Grace, I saw your father at 8 p.m., and he was alert, strong, angry. Men who are about to die of heart failure do not pace around an office shouting about financial fraud. Why did you not say anything? Elias finally looked at her. His eyes were red. Because 2 days after the funeral, Victoria Morgan came to see me. She sat in my living room, drank my coffee, and told me that if I ever spoke about that night, she would make sure my daughter lost her nursing license and my son lost his scholarship. She had documents, forged probably, but convincing enough. So she threatened your children, and I chose my children over your father's memory. I am sorry, Grace. I have been sorry every day for 3 years. Grace sat with that for a moment. The anger was there, hot and sharp, but beneath it was something else, understanding, because she knew what it meant to choose love over justice. She had done it herself for years. Can you testify? She asked. Yes, I will testify. I will tell them everything. It will be dangerous. He looked at the water again. Your father saved my life once. Did he ever tell you that? A warehouse fire at the Hartford plant in 2004. Everyone ran out. Your father ran in, pulled me out by my jacket, singed his own eyebrows off. A ghost of a smile. He looked ridiculous, but he did not hesitate. Grace smiled. He never told me that. He would not. That was who he was. They agreed that Elias would provide a sworn statement to David Calloway and testify before the SEEC when the time came. In exchange, David would ensure legal protection for his children. Grace left the park feeling something she had not felt in weeks. Hope. It lasted 6 days. On a Tuesday evening, Noah called Grace with the second piece of good news she had been waiting for. He had compiled every piece of digital evidence into a single encrypted file. The offshore accounts, the forged signatures, the recordings from Ethan's office, the toxicology report, everything. It is done, Noah said. This is enough to take them all down, every last one of them. Grace called David. We got them. David paused. She could hear him smile. Then let us go fishing. For one evening, Grace allowed herself to believe it was over. She sat in her apartment with the lights on for the first time in days, ate a cinnamon roll that was still warm from the bakery, and talked to her baby. We are going to be okay, she whispered. Mommy figured it out. The next morning, Noah's laptop was dead. Not broken, not crashed. Dead. Every file, every backup, every cloud server he had used was empty. Someone had triggered a remote intrusion that wiped everything simultaneously and with surgical precision. Harper had a mole, Noah said, his voice flat with disbelief. Inside my cloud provider, they nuked everything. 72 hours of recordings, gone. Financial trails, painstakingly assembled over weeks, gone. The only evidence that remained was the physical ledger, the original book her father had kept in the Helios corporate archives. Then the phone calls started. Grace's phone rang at midnight. Elias Hart's number. She answered. Elias? His voice was strained, rushed. Grace, listen to me. I know who killed your father. It was not just Victoria. There is another name in the records. Someone on the board who authorized the payments to Hale. I have the proof. I have the actual canceled checks. Meet me at the old Whitfield warehouse on Industrial Avenue tomorrow night. Elias, that place has been abandoned for years. Exactly. No cameras, no witnesses. Just bring Calloway as a witness. I will bring the checks, Grace agreed. The next night, she and David drove to the warehouse. It was dark. The windows were shattered. The parking lot was empty, except for one car. They waited 30 minutes. Elias did not come. David's phone buzzed. A news alert. Former security professional found dead in apparent robbery in New London. Grace read the headline over David's shoulder. Then she read the name, Elias Hart, 57, found in his home, apparent robbery gone wrong. The detective assigned to the case was a man named Mitchell Graves, who, according to Noah's research, played golf with Ethan Morgan every other Sunday at the Fairfield Country Club. Grace sat in the car for a very long time after that. David did not speak. He knew there were no words for this particular kind of loss. Her last witness was dead. Her digital evidence was destroyed. The trust filing was frozen, and the only proof that remained was a book locked inside a building owned by the man who was trying to destroy her. David, she said finally, we need that ledger. I know. It is inside the Helios archives. Underground, guarded, encrypted. I know. We are going to break in. David looked at her, then at the dark warehouse, then at the sky, where clouds were rolling in from the east. Your father, he said, would either be very proud or very concerned. He would be both, Grace said. That is what parents are. The Helios corporate archives were located 3 levels below the main tower in downtown Hartford. The building had security cameras, electronic access points, a night guard rotation, and a vault door with a 17-digit encryption code. Noah had designed the security system. I built it 2 years ago, he said, sitting in David's office at 1 a.m, spreadsheet asleep on his feet. I know every camera angle, every blind spot, every code rotation. The system resets at 1:15 a.m. We have a 12-minute window. Grace looked at Lily. You do not have to come. Lily was already putting on her coat. You could not stop me with a court order. They entered the building through a service entrance at 12:50 a.m. Noah disabled the cameras along a specific corridor using a remote override he had built into the system as a personal failsafe. I always leave myself a back door, he explained. It is a programmer thing. The hallways below the Helios Tower were cold and dim. Emergency lights painted everything in muted red. Grace's wheelchair hummed softly as she rolled forward, the sound magnified by the concrete walls. They reached the vault door at 1:12 a.m. Noah's fingers flew across the keypad. The lock clicked. The door hissed and swung open. Inside were rows of metal filing cabinets, sealed boxes, and data drives marked with the Helios logo. The air was dry and cold, the temperature controlled to preserve the documents. Grace scanned the room, her eyes locked on a cabinet in the back corner, labeled Legacy Accounts. Lily pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a single, leather-bound book, heavy and old-fashioned, embossed with a faint gold W on the cover. Not M for Morgan. W for Whitfield. Grace took it. Her hands trembled as she opened the first page. Her father's handwriting, the same meticulous block letters from his letter, filled the pages. Account numbers, dates, names, every forged signature, every redirected payment, every stolen cent, documented with the precision of an engineer who knew he was running out of time. This is it, Grace whispered. This is everything. Noah was already scanning pages with a portable device. 5 minutes, he said. I need 5 minutes to get everything. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. The hum of the climate control system stopped. The silence was so complete that Grace could hear her own heartbeat. Then the lights came back. Red. Flashing. And Ethan Morgan stood in the doorway. He was not angry. That was the worst part. He was not shouting or threatening or blustering. He stood in the doorway in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, and he looked tired. Genuinely, deeply tired. "I really wished you had not found that," he said quietly. Grace held the ledger against her chest. "This belongs to me." "It belongs to a dead man, Grace, and dead men do not run companies." "No, but their daughters do." Ethan studied her for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not cruelty, but memory. The ghost of the man he used to be, looking at the woman he used to love. "You know, I cannot let you leave with that," he said. "And you know, I will never stop trying." The security team arrived within minutes. 2 men in dark uniforms escorted Grace, Lily, and Noah out of the building. The ledger was confiscated. Noah's scanning device was taken. They were released at the curb with a warning about trespassing. The parking garage was empty, cold. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. Grace sat in her wheelchair in that garage, and the wall she had built around herself cracked wide open. She cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. She sobbed, deep and ugly and broken, her hand on her belly and her forehead pressed against the arm of her chair. Everything she had worked for, every risk she had taken, every small piece of hope she had gathered, was gone. "I am sorry, baby," she whispered to her unborn child. "Mommy tried." Lily knelt beside her. Noah stood a few feet away, spreadsheet pressing his warm body against Grace's legs, sensing the grief. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. The drive home was silent. Grace stared out the window at the passing streetlights and thought about giving up. Not in an abstract way, in a specific, practical way. She thought about the settlement Ethan had offered, the apartment, the monthly payments, a quiet life, no more fighting. The baby kicked, hard, right against her palm, and Grace heard her father's voice, not really, but in the way you hear the people you love when you need them most. Do not miss. She closed her eyes, opened them. "David," she said, "where did my father go when he wanted to hide something important?" David glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You mean aside from his office? Somewhere personal. Somewhere only family would know." David was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he smiled. "The cabin," he said. "The fishing cabin in Vermont." The cabin sat on 4 acres of wooded land near Stowe, Vermont. William Whitfield had bought it when Grace was 7 years old, and every summer of her childhood had been spent there, fishing in the stream, reading on the porch, watching her father tie flies at the kitchen table, with the concentration of a brain surgeon. Under the floorboards of the main room, beneath a rug that depicted a somewhat aggressive-looking moose, there was a lockbox. Grace had known about it since she was 10. Her father had shown her, pressing a finger to his lips. "This is for the really important stuff," he had said. "The tax returns go in the safe at the office, but the things that actually matter, they go here, where the fish can guard them." She had laughed at the time. She was not laughing now. Lily and David drove to Vermont while Grace stayed behind. The doctors had been clear, complete bed rest. The stress of the past weeks had triggered early contractions that put both Grace and her baby at risk. So Grace lay in a hospital bed at Mercy General in Bridgeport, hooked to a fetal monitor that beeped steadily, and waited. The waiting was the hardest part of everything. Harder than the dinner, harder than the smear campaign, harder than the vault, because this was the last chance, and she could not be there for it. Lily called from the cabin. "We are here. The place looks the same. Your dad's fishing rods are still on the porch." "Under the moose rug," Grace said, "there is a lockbox. The combination is July 19th. July 19th? The date I caught my first fish and cried about it." Lily paused. "You cried over a fish?" "I was 12. Focus, Lily. She heard Lily move through the cabin, the creak of floorboards, the scrape of the rug being pulled aside, David's voice in the background. Careful with that, the wood is old. Then silence. Grace, Lily said. Her voice had changed. There is a ledger in here, a leather one, identical to the one in the vault. Grace's heart stopped, then started again, hard. My father made 2 copies. There is a note attached to it. It says, "The vault copy is the decoy. This one is the original. I always was a cautious old fool." Grace pressed her hand against her mouth. Even from the grave, even after everything, her father had been one step ahead. He knew the vault might be compromised. He knew someone might find and destroy the copy. So he put the real one in the place only Grace would know, protected by a date that only had meaning to the 2 of them. There is more, Lily said. There are journals, 4 of them, and a small tape recorder with cassettes. Bring everything, Grace said. Bring it all. David's voice came through the phone, calm and warm. Your father was the smartest man I ever knew, and also the most sentimental. He hid $1 billion document under a moose rug next to his fishing gear. Grace laughed through her tears. That is exactly who he was. The ledger was everything. Every financial record, every forged signature, every date, every account, every name. But the journals were the revelation that changed everything. In his own handwriting, William Whitfield had documented a series of meetings between Victoria Morgan and Dr. Martin Hale. Dates, locations, payments routed through a charitable foundation that Victoria controlled, a charity that existed on paper and did nothing except move money from Victoria's accounts to Hale's. And in the final journal, dated 1 week before his death, William had written, "If I die suddenly, look at who benefits. Follow the pearls." Follow the pearls, Victoria's signature accessory. The pearls she wore to every dinner, every meeting, every occasion. The pearls she wore while her husband's best friend's daughter was humiliated at Thanksgiving dinner. But it was the tape recordings that delivered the final blow. William, suspecting his time was short, had hidden a small recorder in his study. One cassette captured a conversation between Victoria and Dr. Hale. Victoria's voice, clear and unmistakable. How much longer? Hale. Another 2 weeks at most. The dosage is calibrated. It will present as cardiac failure. Victoria. Good. Make it look natural. My son's future depends on it. Grace listened to that recording in her hospital bed, the fetal monitor beeping beside her, and felt something she had not felt since the night of the dinner. Not anger, not grief, certainty. She knew what she had to do, and she knew exactly when to do it. The Helios Technologies annual shareholder gala was in 3 days, 500 guests, every board member, every major investor, every reporter who covered Wall Street. And on stage, in front of all of them, Ethan Morgan was scheduled to sign the $950 million merger that would cement his control over the company forever. Grace picked up her phone. David, I need you to get me into that gala. Grace, you are in a hospital bed. I know. Get me a nice dress, something in black, and make sure the audio-visual team at the Langham knows how to play a cassette tape. David was quiet for a moment. Then, your father would either be very proud or very concerned right now. He would be both, Grace said. That is what parents are. The ballroom of the Langham Hotel was decorated in silver and white. Ice sculptures, crystal centerpieces, a string orchestra playing something by Vivaldi, 500 guests in black tie and evening gowns, drinking champagne that cost $60 a glass. At the front of the room, a stage held a long table with documents, pens, and microphones. A banner behind it read, Helios Corporation, the future of innovation, $950 million strategic partnership. Ethan Morgan stood at the center of it all. Black tuxedo, perfect hair, the smile of a man who believed he had won. Beside him, Harper Sinclair in a scarlet gown, her hand resting on his arm like she owned him. Because in many ways she did. Victoria Morgan sat in the front row, pearls gleaming, watching her son with the satisfied expression of a woman whose plans had all come together. The signing was scheduled for 9 p.m. At 8:45, as Ethan began his remarks, thanking the investors, the board, his incredible team, the ballroom doors opened. The crowd turned. Grace Whitfield Morgan appeared at the entrance. She wore a simple black dress. Her wheelchair gleamed under the chandeliers. In her lap was a leather-bound book and a small tape player. The murmuring started immediately. Reporters reached for their phones. Cameras pivoted. The string orchestra stopped mid-note. Grace wheeled herself down the center aisle. Not fast, not slow, deliberate. Ethan saw her, and the speech died on his lips. Harper's hand tightened on his arm. Victoria rose slightly from her chair, then sat back down, forcing composure. Grace stopped in the center of the ballroom. She did not go to the stage. She did not need elevation. She had something better. "Good evening," she said. Her voice carried easily across the silent room. "I am sorry to interrupt. I know there is a $950 million deal to sign. But before you put your names on those papers, there is something you need to hear." Ethan leaned into his microphone. "Grace, this is not the time or the place." "On the contrary," she said, "it is exactly the time and exactly the place. The last time I was in a room like this with your family, you handed me divorce papers and told me to sign them before dessert. Tonight, I brought something of my own." She held up the ledger. "This book was written by my father, William Whitfield, the man who founded the company you now call Helios. In it, he documented every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every fraudulent transfer that was made in his name after his death. Your merger is built on stolen money, and tonight, it ends." The room erupted in whispers. Cameras flashed. Ethan stepped forward, his voice tight. "That document is a forgery. My lawyers have already established that." "Your lawyers reviewed a copy," Grace said calmly. "This is the original, kept in a location that only my father and I knew about. Every page is notarized, every signature verified, and I have something else." She lifted the tape player. "My father knew he was being killed. He hid a recorder in his study, and this is what it captured." She pressed play. The ballroom went silent. Victoria's voice filled the room, amplified through the sound system that David had arranged with the hotel's AV team earlier that evening. Clear, unmistakable. "How much longer?" Dr. Hale's voice. "Another 2 weeks at most. The dosage is calibrated. It will present as cardiac failure." Victoria. "Good. Make it look natural. My son's future depends on it." The recording ended. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Grace had ever heard. Victoria Morgan sat frozen in the front row. Every drop of color had drained from her face. Her hand went to her pearls, an unconscious gesture, as if touching them could somehow protect her from what had just been exposed. Ethan stared at his mother, not at Grace, at Victoria. "Mom," he said. The word came out small. "What is that?" Victoria did not answer. "Mom." His voice cracked. "Tell me that is not real." The silence was its own answer. Ethan's hand gripped the edge of the podium. The confident CEO, the man who had handed divorce papers to his pregnant wife at Thanksgiving dinner, the man who had called her dead weight, looked like a child who had just learned that the person he trusted most in the world was a stranger. "You killed him," Ethan whispered. "You killed her father." Victoria's lips moved, but no sound came out. Grace watched this moment and felt something she did not expect. Not triumph, not satisfaction, sadness. Because Ethan, for all his cruelty and ambition and failure, had genuinely not known. He had stolen a company and betrayed a wife, but he had not murdered a man. His mother had done that. And in this moment, watching his world shatter, Grace saw the man he might have been if Victoria had not shaped him into what he became. It did not excuse him, but it explained him, and sometimes understanding is its own kind of release. Harper Sinclair stepped away from Ethan. Physically, visibly, the cameras caught it, her hand dropping from his arm, her body shifting toward the microphone at the edge of the stage, the opportunist calculating her next move. And then Harper did exactly what an opportunist does. She spoke into the microphone, her voice clear and steady. I want to state for the record that I have been aware of financial irregularities within Helios Corporation for some time. I have maintained private documentation of these irregularities as a safeguard. I am prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation. The crowd gasped. Ethan turned to her, disbelief flooding his face. Harper, what are you doing? She looked at him with an expression that contained no love, no loyalty, and no apology. Surviving. You were part of all of it. Every transfer, every forged document. Your signature is on those accounts. And your mother's voice is on that tape. I think we both know who has the bigger problem tonight, Ethan. He stared at her, then at his mother, then at the 500 faces staring back at him with horror and fascination and the particular hunger that crowds develop when they sense blood. Was any of it real? He asked. To no one in particular, to everyone, to the room. No one answered. David Reynolds stepped forward from the side of the ballroom, holding a folder. Beside him stood two men in dark suits with federal badges. By order of the Securities and Exchange Commission, David said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had waited 3 years for this moment, all Helios Corporation transactions are frozen, pending a full investigation into corporate fraud, embezzlement, and falsification of financial documents. He turned to the agents. They stepped forward. Victoria Morgan, you are being detained for questioning regarding the death of William Whitfield. Victoria stood. Her pearls caught the chandelier light one final time. She looked at Grace as she was led past the wheelchair. Their eyes met. You think you have won? Victoria said. Grace held her gaze. My father won 3 years ago from beyond the grave. I just delivered the message. Victoria was escorted out. The pearls disappeared through the ballroom doors. Ethan was next. The agents approached him with the particular carefulness reserved for men who might either collapse or run. He did neither. He stepped down from the stage and walked toward Grace. The agents led him, staying close but not intervening. He stopped in front of her wheelchair. He looked at her for a long time. His eyes were red. The tuxedo that had fit him so perfectly at the beginning of the evening now seemed to hang on him like borrowed clothes. I did not know, he said. About your father, I swear I did not know. Grace looked up at the man who had once carried her from a burning car, who had slept on hospital floors, who had somewhere along the way traded everything good in himself for everything shiny in the world. I know, she said. That is the worst part. He nodded, a small, broken movement. Then the agents led him away. Harper was last. She was arrested at the side door, trying to leave through the kitchen. The reporters found her, before the agents did, microphones stabbing forward. Were you involved in the financial fraud? Did you know about the poisoning? Harper said nothing. For the first time in the entire story, Harper Sinclair had nothing to say. The ballroom was chaos after that. Reporters filing stories, board members in heated phone calls, investors demanding answers. But at the center of it all, in the eye of the storm, Grace sat quietly in her wheelchair. Lily appeared beside her. Her eyes were wet. "You did it." "We did it," Grace said. "All of us." Noah stood nearby. Spreadsheet somehow having gotten past hotel security and now sitting obediently at his feet. Noah looked at Grace and gave a small nod. No words. He was never good with words, but the nod said everything. David handed Grace an envelope. Inside was a single document. The board just voted. Unanimous. "You have been reinstated as chair of Helios Holdings, effective immediately. And the first order of business, if you approve, is reverting the company name to its original." Grace looked at the document. Whitfield Enterprises. Her father's name, back where it belonged. She signed it with a pen that David had been carrying in his jacket pocket for 3 years. He had bought it the day after the funeral, he told her later, knowing that eventually, somehow, she would need it. 6 months later. The fishing cabin in Vermont sat warm and golden in the August sun. The stream behind the property caught the light and threw it back in silver ribbons. Birds sang in the birch trees. The moose rug had been cleaned and returned to its place of honor in the living room, minus the lockbox underneath, which was no longer needed. Grace sat on the porch in her wheelchair. In her arms was a baby girl, 7 weeks old, with her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness. She had been born in June, healthy and loud, and had spent her first weeks being spoiled relentlessly by everyone within a 50-mile radius. Inside the cabin, Lily was in the kitchen, attempting pancakes. Smoke was involved. "I followed the recipe exactly," Lily called out through the window. "Lily, the stove was on the highest setting. The recipe said high heat. It said medium high. Those are basically the same thing." David sat in an Adirondack chair on the porch. Bourbon in hand, despite it being 10:30 in the morning, reading the newspaper. He looked over his glasses at Grace. "You know," he said, "your father made terrible pancakes too. It must be a requirement for people in this cabin." Noah was on the lawn, throwing a tennis ball for Spreadsheet, who retrieved it with the enthusiasm of a dog who believed every throw was the greatest event in the history of the world. Mrs. Callahan had driven up from Bridgeport that morning. She emerged from the cabin carrying a tray. "I brought cinnamon rolls," she announced, "because clearly someone needs to provide actual food." Lily's voice from the kitchen. "I heard that." "You were meant to, dear." Grace looked down at her daughter. The baby was asleep. Her tiny hand curled around Grace's finger. The sunlight fell across both of them, warm and unhurried. She thought about the night in the driveway, when she had called her mother's disconnected number and whispered for help that could not come. She thought about the dark apartment and the hollow feeling that had swallowed her whole. She thought about the parking garage. The worst cry of her life, and the words she had whispered to her unborn child. "I am sorry, baby. Mommy tried." She was not sorry anymore. Mommy had not just tried. Mommy had finished it. "Your grandfather built something incredible," she said softly to her sleeping daughter, "and one day I will tell you the whole story. How he was brave and careful and loved us more than anything. How he hid the most important thing in the world under a moose rug. How a woman named Lily once convinced an entire room of wealthy people that she was an Italian Contessa. How a man named Noah named his dog after a spreadsheet. And how your mommy learned that the people who tell you that you are nothing are usually the ones who need you the most." The baby stirred, stretched, settled. David raised his bourbon glass toward the sky. "To William," he said quietly. Grace smiled. "To Dad." The sunlight shifted, the stream sang, Spreadsheet barked joyfully at a butterfly, and somewhere inside the cabin, Lily set off the smoke alarm for the second time, followed by Mrs. Callahan's voice saying, "Step away from the stove, dear. Step away." Grace laughed. Real, full, free. The kind of laugh that comes from a woman who lost everything and built it back. Not with vengeance, but with truth. Not alone, but with people who loved her. And not standing but sitting in a wheelchair, with her baby in her arms and cinnamon rolls on the table, and a summer morning that asked nothing of her except to breathe. They called her broken. They called her worthless. They called her dead weight. But here she was, whole, powerful, home. And the name on the company, the name on the cabin, the name she whispered to her daughter like a lullaby and a promise, was Whitfield. Always Whitfield, always. Closing disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with real-life lessons and emotional value. While the characters and events are fictional, the themes of courage, resilience, and justice are universal. Every word was crafted with intention, not generated carelessly, but built with purpose. To remind you that even in the darkest chapters, your story is not over. Thank you for watching until the end. We will see you in the next one.